name's Caitlin, and this is my channel, BandysBooks. Today I am here because it is Tag Tuesday, and I'm so excited to get to do a book tag. It's been quite a while since I got to do one of these videos, and so I had a whole broad selection of tags to choose from. I decided I was going to go ahead and do the Do I Own That Book Trope challenge. And this has 20 prompts, and each of the prompts is a different, very popular trope. Most of them are fantasy tropes, but there are a handful of like romance and contemporary tropes as well. So we're just going to go down the list. I've already picked out the books that I have that fulfill those tropes. And in several cases, I either own a book, but somebody's borrowing it right now, because I do lend out my books, or I've read a book, but I don't own a copy of it. There's a couple books on the list that I haven't read yet as well, but I do own copies or partial copies of. So I'll just kind of explain as I go. Oh, and I should add, I found this tag from Princess of Paperback. I watched her video, which was lovely. She was actually searching for the books while she was doing the tag. My books are so spread out in my house that it's really not possible to do it that way. Like, I'd have to like shoot part of it in one room and then go to another room. Anyways, it's easier for me to just pick them out. And then the original creator of this tag was Robbie. And I did go to Robbie's YouTube to see the original video, but unfortunately they've made all of their videos private, so the original video no longer exists. However, if you look up this book tag on YouTube, you will find plenty of iterations of it if you're interested in checking it out. So I have the prompts here on my computer. I have the books beside me. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Prompt number 1 is The Love Triangle, and it's a book featuring a character with 2 love interests. So I had to laugh because this is literally it starting out with my least favorite trope, the love triangle. I'm so sick of it. It is in so much fantasy, so much sci-fi, so much just everywhere, and I'm so tired of seeing love triangles where everybody's jealous and unhealthy. So I was super excited that I have a book that fits this prompt, first of all, but second of also subverts this prompt, and that is The Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. So there is a love triangle in this story. It is one female character and 2 male characters, but they are in a polyamorous relationship. Everybody is happy, they communicate well, they have individual relationships with each other that do not threaten the relationship with the other person, and I really love it. It is a very good example of what a healthy polyamorous relationship should look like, and really honestly a healthy relationship in general, because the communication is the key. And whether you're monogamous or polyamorous, that is a very, very important thing. I really love the representation of relationships in this book. I love a lot of things about this book. I could really wax poetic about it. It's got such a unique plot. The main character is so fierce and badass. We could go on and on. This was the first book that I read in June. You can see my TBR link up here if you're interested in finding out what the other books are. But this was a hell of a way to start out the month. If you haven't picked this one up, go check it out. Number 2, Enemies to Lovers, a book featuring 2 characters that begin as enemies and then it turns into love or lust. So this is a book that I do own, but I do not have my copy with me right at the moment. My mom is borrowing it. My mom runs a little free library, and she's also an avid reader, and so we tend to swap books. Like, I see her maybe every other month because I live in Vegas and she lives in San Diego. So every other month, either I go out to San Diego or her and my dad come out here to visit, and I have a big box of books to give for her. She always brings me a bunch of books, and in that way we kind of try to like save ourselves from buying 1,000 books. So she has my copy of this book at the moment, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book features a young man who is the son of the President of the United States and a young man who is in line to become the next king in England. And the 2 of them initially start out really not liking each other. There's some animosity. They each think the other is pretentious and snotty, and they kind of have a very public feud. What ends up happening is that they're forced to spend some time together, and they start to realize that they actually, in fact, have quite a bit in common, and they start to slowly become friends and eventually realize that they like each other in a more romantic sense. I really loved this book for the snarky banter, and like it's just really witty and funny. I found myself laughing at it a lot. I'm not super big on romance, and this was probably the first romance book that I really, really enjoyed. It also created a version of the United States that I like desperately wish for. So if you are a little skeptical about romance and you want to give something a try, this would be my suggestion. Alright, trope number 3, The Chosen One, a book featuring a character destined to save everyone / the world. Okay, so this one was a little harder for me actually. I figured that I would have tons of Chosen One books, and I guess it depends on what your definition of the Chosen One is. My definition is like literally a prophecy that foretells this person's birth and they're saving the world or whatever. I didn't have much of that, so I did some digging, and I have a book, or I have a part of a series that does have a Chosen One prophecy, but I don't have the first book in the series. I own only like the middle book, I think, and that's the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. I have not read it yet. I do, like, for series that I know that I want to read, I do, when I go to bookstores and stuff, look for random books, and if I see like book 2 of a series and I haven't started yet, I'll go ahead and purchase it if it's a good price, because I know I'm going to build up that series as I go. So that's what's happened here. I happened to find Thunderhead, and that one was, I think, the second or third book in the series, but it was like a really inexpensive price and a super nice hardback cover. So I went ahead and purchased that one, knowing that I'll buy the other 2 books eventually. So this book, or the series, is about a world in which people do not die anymore of natural causes or accidents or anything. The only way to truly die is to be reaped. The main character of the story is basically chosen to be one of these reapers who shepherds people into true death. So I'm really looking forward to reading it. I've heard very good things about this series. I know that Neil Shusterman is a really well-respected and loved author. I haven't read any of his books yet, although I own a couple. So I'm very much looking forward to diving into this trilogy eventually. After that, we have number 4, Found Family, a book showing characters creating a chosen family from friends and those closest to them. Would this even be a BandysBooks episode if I didn't get to talk about one of my favorite books, House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune? This is very much a found family book. It features a social worker named Linus. He inspects basically foster homes for magical children. He just kind of has a double purpose. He's making sure that A, that the children are being well cared for, and B, that they're not providing a threat to the area around them. He gets sent to a unique school out on the Cerulean Sea, and he meets a handful of children and the administrator of the school, all of which are nothing like he expected, and eventually grow to be his found family of sorts. Wonderful, lovely, fluffy book. I know some people think it's like a little too simplistic or too juvenile. For me, I love it. It was just this like warm, fuzzy hug of a book. You just leave feeling good. The main conflict isn't like a life-threatening or universe-threatening conflict. It's just something normal, and I really appreciated that. After that, we're going to go to number 5, Gray Morality, a book featuring characters that don't appear either good or bad. Okay, so I feel like there's a lot of books that could fit into this particular trope. I think that gray morality has become really, really popular. I know that there's like a whole thing on Bookstagram that I see regularly where like people like to read romance with really morally gray male leads, and that's like the dark romance, and it's sexy apparently. It doesn't do it for me, but you know, whatever floats your boat. So I decided to go more in the direction of fantasy, and I still had a lot of choices there, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this one specific book, because there is an author above all authors who writes amazing morally gray characters and like bookfuls of them, and that is Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Almost every single character in this book is morally gray. Like, there's literally like an abundance of morally gray characters. The good guys have questionable motives. The bad guys sometimes behave in a good way to accomplish their evil means. It's just, you never know who to trust. Even the people that you think you like and you think are good guys sometimes turn out to be bad guys. It is so excellent in terms of morally gray characters. And honestly, there's only like 1 or 2 characters that are 100% thoroughly either good or bad. And I feel like they don't last very long in the story. Like, if you're not flexible and gray in some way, you get killed off in this story. So hopefully that didn't spoil it for anyone. But yeah, king of morally gray characters. After that, we have number 6, Competitions, Games, or Tournaments, a book featuring one of these as a core element directly involving the characters. So in January, I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. That was my first time reading anything by that author, and I really enjoyed it. So immediately I jumped online and found out she had a whole bunch of other books, and I've since been working my way through her backlist of books. I've finished Uprooted, and then I recently started the Scholomance series. I've read the first 2 books in the Scholomance series, and the only reason I haven't read any more than that is because the next book isn't set to publish until the end of the year. So for this prompt, I'm gonna go with A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Also, can we just admire how pretty this book is? I love this cover. And then it has the maps and stuff inside, which I love as well. So this is kind of an interesting book. It features a magical school. The children at the magical school are basically different types of magical people, and they're at school to learn how to fight off evil creatures. There's all sorts of evil creatures in the world that are drawn to their power and want to eat them. So the thing that makes this unique, this school structure, is that you have this magical kind of omnipotent school, but there's no teachers, no administrator, no principal, no parents at the door shepherding the children in, no kindly old wizard to, help them navigate this world. They're just basically thrust into this magical school with this huge concentration of these evil creatures, and then they just have to kind of learn how to defend themselves. So the school, because it's omnipotent in some ways, tends to give them tasks that are going to help them to learn and grow, but they're still pretty self-reliant, and every time they open a cupboard or get into bed or walk to a different room, they have to check everything for these evil creatures. Anyways, it's a really interesting concept. I haven't seen it done quite this way before. So if you like a good magical school, kids growing up and learning magic kind of a book, but with maybe a darker twist, this is the one for you. After that, we have number 7, Sibling Rivalry, a book that contains siblings that are pit against each other. I feel like this is one that works out pretty well for fantasy, and the first book that I thought of was actually Red Queen. I did get rid of my copy of Red Queen just because, honestly, I just feel so about the series. I don't love it, I don't hate it. I may finish it at some point, but kind of just ambivalent about it. So that left me scratching my head for what I could pick for a sibling rivalry. And then I remembered on my TBR for the month of June, I have I'll Give You the Sun by Jackie Nelson. This is about 2 siblings, Jude and Noah, and they have a falling out of sorts around age 13. Prior to age 13, they're best buds, and then something happens that causes them to have a falling out. And then I think that this book comes back later in life, around 16 or 17, and they have to kind of figure this relationship out. But a big portion of it is this sibling rivalry. All right, after that, we have number 8, Revenge Plot, a book that contains a character or characters whose motivation is fueled by revenge. This one was a tricky one for me. I feel like there should be a lot of revenge books, and most of the ones that I could think of were actually thrillers and suspense, and not ones that I own copies of. So I was kind of scraping my brain trying to figure out what I could put for this prompt. And then I remembered The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest by Stieg Larsson. So this is from the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. This is the 3rd book in the series, and this features Elizabeth Flander. She's in the hospital, she's been shot in the face, and she's pending trial for murder. And of course she's not a murderer, and she's basically waiting to be well enough so that she can go exact revenge on the person that shot her. I read this such a long time ago, I honestly forgot a large amount of the details, but I remember the general premise of this book being revenge. And I remember really liking this series when I read it. I was probably in my early 20s when I read it. Definitely a good one if you haven't checked them out. And then after that, we have Here Comes the Cavalry. Cavalry. I have a hard time with that word. Cavalry. A book that just when the protagonist is going to lose, here comes unexpected help. So, I feel like there is one instance of unexpected help that stands out in my mind above all else. I had to take it way back for that. And that is The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. Potentially spoilers if you haven't read the Lord of the Rings series, maybe skip ahead 45 seconds. But there's one scene in this book where Aragorn is out on the battlefield. He's leading the men of Gondor and Rowan against the orcs. Everything is chaos. The bad guys are winning, the good guys are losing. It seems hopeless. And then way up on the hill, there appears Gandalf and a whole bunch of reinforcements, and that turns the tide of the war. So that would be perfect for the cavalry coming in to save the day. Number 10, The Dark Lord, a book containing a character who appears to be doing evil for evil's sake. Okay, so this is a tricky prompt because they're asking for a Dark Lord, but then they also say, like, being evil for evil's sake. And I don't feel like that there's any character that I can think of that's evil, like Overlord, that's just evil for the sake of evil. All of them have backstories. Whether those backstories are relevant or compelling or not is different, but they all have backstories. So I'm gonna take it back, and we're gonna stay within the same series, and we're gonna go to The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I would say that definitely within this specific story, Sauron kind of comes across as being evil just for evil's sake, but if you've read The Silmarillion or any of the other books that are within Tolkien's world, you know that there is a backstory to Sauron, so he's really not a Dark Lord just for the sake of being a Dark Lord. Number 11, The Orphaned Protagonist, a book featuring a character whose parents are either dead before or at the beginning of the book. This one, I could think of a handful of books. There's lots of fantasy, sci-fi, etc. that kind of go in that direction, but I went in a little bit of a different direction, and I went with The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is about a character named Nobody Owens who literally lives in a graveyard, and it is such a cute story. I really like it. It's one of my favorite books by Neil Gaiman. If you haven't read it, check it out. Next up, we have The Quest, a book featuring the main protagonist going on a journey for a particular goal. So once again, there are quite a few books that fit this trope. There's so many books about going on a quest. I first thought of Thief by Megan Willen Turner. That's a great one where they're on a quest to find some jewels and this special thing for the queen. Super good book. Really enjoy that series. But I don't have my copy. A friend of mine is borrowing it, so I started thinking about what else I could talk about. And I remembered this beautiful book that I was gifted by an indie author on Instagram earlier this year. I've talked about it a couple times on the channel. I also posted reviews on my Instagram and on all the like reviewing sites and stuff. But it's called Bones to the Wind, and it is by Tatiana Obey. This is a duology. It's called the Forging of Age duology, and it is set in North Africa, and the main characters are Nico and Raja. Raja is a prolific huntress. Her father was an extraordinary hunter, and he's like taught her his skills. And Nico is like the politician's daughter. She's raised to be a politician herself, basically. And both of them are coming of age. So there's this thing called the forging, and basically what the forging is all the children that are coming of age are sent out into the desert. They have to hunt a large creature called a Gonda, which is the way that I envision it, like a massive desert squid of sorts. And they have to kill one and bring it back to prove that they're worthy of staying within this community. If you fail the forging, then you're basically excommunicated from the community and you have to go live on your own. Obviously, everybody has an interest in passing. So Raja and Nico are kind of rivals, and they both set off in this quest to succeed in catching a Gonda, and they both have their own personal entanglements that are going on. So two separate quests that kind of tie in and out of each other at points. I really love this book. If you're into supporting indie authors and giving people a shot that maybe don't have big name publishers behind you, this is such a good book. I really loved it, and I cannot wait for the second book in the trilogy in the duology to come out. After that, we have 13, Friends to Lovers, a book featuring two characters who have a friend dynamic who eventually develop a romance. So these were some of the hardest prompts for me, the next two coming up, just because I don't read a lot of romance, and I feel like these are more romancy tropes. In this particular case, I have a book that I've read that I like immediately thought of for this trope, but I don't own a copy, and I probably won't ever own a copy. And that's People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. When I did my romance month back in March, I think it was, I decided to give a couple of the popular romances a chance, and I found out that I actually do quite enjoy Emily Henry's writing style. She's pretty snarky and sarcastic, and her characters have a lot of witty repartee. It makes them a little bit more interesting for me than like the typical sappy romance. I also appreciate that there's usually a lot of conflict and emotional growth. It's not just like, oh, we met, I saw you, we fell in love, and then we had a bunch of babies. Like, it's a little deeper, I guess. So, people we meet on vacation, I don't remember the name of the characters because it's been a while, but the main female character and the main male character are friends. They've been taking vacations together for a long time, so every year they take like a little bit of money and scrap together a vacation on a budget. Now the female character is working for a travel magazine, and she's doing all these luxurious vacations, and it's been a while since they've traveled together. She's feeling kind of stuck, stiff, and stale, and so she reaches out to him and is like, hey, like, let's do one of those old vacations like we used to, where we cobble together the budget and let's go somewhere and just have fun. And they plan a vacation in Palm Springs. It's the summer. They get there, the air conditioning in their Airbnb is not working, the pool sucks, like everything that can go wrong goes wrong. He injures his back. There's just a comedy of errors, basically. But through this comedy of errors, the two of them start to realize that maybe they're more than just friends. And I liked that the growth that happened between the two of them was very much a slow burn. It wasn't like one of them just woke up one day and like snapped their fingers and, aha, I'm in love with this person. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that they go through before they get to that point. 14, the book-loving character, a book featuring a character who loves reading books. I had a couple books that I think would fit into this, but I went ahead and went with The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. So this is a story about a character named Monsieur Perdu, and Monsieur Perdu has a bookshop, and he has the ability to kind of sense what sort of a book you need. So when somebody comes in and they're dealing with emotional stuff, he knows exactly what to recommend them to fix what they're feeling. Only problem is he doesn't know how to fix himself. So he goes on this journey to fix himself and come to terms with his emotions. And he basically takes off and starts spreading books and wisdom throughout the world. Cute book. After that, we have 15, Amnesia, a book featuring a character, normally the protagonist, who suffers from amnesia. I don't have any books here that fit this particular prompt. I have read several, but I don't own any of them. The most recent one that I read that I can think of that fits the prompt is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This is a story about a man living in a house on Needless Street, and the characters that are living there with him. And so there's a cat, there's a man, there's a little girl, there's the next door neighbor, and basically you're kind of confused in the beginning. You feel like you're not getting the whole story, and you're not really getting the whole story because the man isn't remembering everything. So you're getting things in a very fragmented way, and I think you're disoriented in the way that the man is himself. As the story progresses, things start to become a little more clear. We start to find out what actually happened to this man. But amnesia, does play a big part in it. 16, Magic School, a book featuring a school setting of the magical variety. So the book that I chose for this is a book that I have read. I've actually read 2 books in the series. It's a trilogy, and I'm hoping to read the 3rd book very soon. I read them via the library, so I don't own copies of them. However, I am planning on buying copies of them. I've just been waiting for the right copies to come up because there's multiple versions of the hardbacks, and so I want to make sure I get like a matching set. But that's The Poppy War by ORPHAN. This book is based loosely on the Second Sino-Japanese War. It's really, really interesting. Magic exists, dragons exist, all sorts of different stuff exists. And basically the main character is an orphan at the beginning. She could have fit in the orphan prompt as well. So she's an orphan at the beginning. She is taken into someone's home kind of as like a servant. They call themselves her auntie, but they basically treat her like a servant. She decides that the only way for her to make her way in life is to get accepted into this military academy for like magical peoples. And she doesn't just want to get into anyone, she wants to get into the very, very best one. So she literally tortures herself by like rigging a candle to drip hot wax on her if she falls asleep while she's studying. She does all sorts of like awful stuff to herself to make sure that she can take in as much knowledge as possible. She ends up scoring like in the very top percentile and being sent to this really, really prestigious school where she eventually learns that she has the ability to connect with the spirit world, and that provides her with different powers. The story kind of continues on from there, but in the first book, the focus is mostly on her schooling and her growth from being this orphaned peasant child to being, an elite student at this prestigious academy. Next up, we have the bad boy character, a book featuring a character who is bad, brooding, and is most commonly paired with a sad or tragic backstory. So I struggled with this one a little bit. I feel like this one's common in romance a lot, where you have the dark, brooding guy who has this tragic backstory that totally writes off why he was an asshole to everybody, and he's not really actually an asshole. He's just pretending to be an asshole because he secretly has this soft, mushy heart, and he's out feeding stray puppies and helping the homeless, but he's acting like a jerk at the same time. I hate this trope, in case you can't tell. It was a bit of a struggle trying to figure out what book I was going to do for this one, so I did end up settling on The Cruel Prince. This is a book that I listened to on audiobook. I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to read the series or not, so I was like, well, let me just try out the first book on audiobook. What do I have to lose? It was okay. It wasn't my favorite, honestly, and one of the main reasons is Cardigan. That's a sweater. Carden is one of the main characters, and he's an asshole. He basically torments and tortures our main character. He treats her like she's subhuman. Even once he gets to know her better and realizes that she's not subhuman and he should probably be a little more respectful, he continues to treat her like garbage. And I guess at some point he's given some sort of tragic backstory. I don't feel like this backstory is very tragic. I don't feel like it made him any more sympathetic. If anything, it made me more pissed off at him because I feel like he should know better. But I'll save that rant for another video. Maybe I'll do a whole review. Anyways, I guess he kind of fits the bad boy with the tragic backstory. So there you have it. I don't know if I'll continue with this series or not. I know that it's wildly popular. People say it gets better as it continues. There's 2 more, Queen of Nothing and The Wicked King or something like that. So I think I'll probably try the second book in the series, but if it doesn't start to pick up after the second book, then forget about it. Number 18, Resurrection, a book that features a character who you thought was dead, but is back again. Okay, I feel like this one, for me, was oddly hard to find. I feel like it should be popular, but it's not really popular, because Resurrection is different. I feel like there's a lot of fake deaths where, an author leaves a cliffhanger, and you think someone's dead, and then they show up later, and there's a clever explanation for why they're not really dead. But for actual resurrections, I went with A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. Man, this is a heavy book. I'm going to do my weights with this. Jon Snow. Oh, sorry, spoilers. In case you are not caught up with the book/TV series. Jon Snow dies. He is stabbed a la Caesar. All his brothers of the Black, they stab him to death. And he dies. And he isn't brought back to life until a decent bit later. The Red Priestess Melisandre is the one that performs, the service to bring him back, and he literally gets a chance to live a second life. So there's my resurrection pick. Number 19, The Redemption Arc, a book featuring a character who was previously a bad or evil character who wants to change. I know where they were going with this. I'm going to go slightly different direction. I don't know that the character is necessarily an evil character, but there is a redemption arc. This book is what I would call a modern classic at this point, and I haven't actually read it yet, but I am familiar with what it's about vaguely. I actually have all 3 of his books sitting on my shelves right now, and I'm hoping to read them very, very soon. So basically, there are 2 boys that grew up together in Afghanistan, one of them wealthy, one of them the child of a servant, and they're good friends. One day, something terrible happens to the child of the servant, and the rich boy basically doesn't do anything to stop it or help him. Eventually, he realizes that the servant and the child would be better off without being near his family, and he chases them away. He ends up going to America, becoming a successful journalist, and at some point he goes back to Afghanistan full of guilt and regret for what happened with his friend and his friend's family, and he tries his best to redeem himself by rescuing them. I've heard that this is a very heartbreaking book, and I know that the redemption narrative sets really heavily on the main character, so I'm looking forward to reading it. And finally, our last book of the day, Forbidden Love or Romance, a book featuring a romance that can't work. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. The book that I have picked for this prompt, I am literally in the process of reading right now. I'm at the 80% point, so I'm only 20% from seeing how it ends, and I think I know where it goes, so unless there's like a huge twist that I'm not expecting, then this will stand. And that book is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So this book is basically, the world is the same as it is, except there is a company that calls you and notifies you 24 hours before you're supposed to die, gives you time to, hypothetically close up any business that you need to close up. So both Rufus and Mateo, who are the two main characters, get notified that their death is impending, and they go about living their last 24 hours. They both are a little lonely, and for various reasons, they end up on this app called The Last Friend, which is designed to keep you company for the last 24 hours. They meet each other, and they encourage each other to make amends with people, to say goodbyes, to live life to the fullest, to do fun things, get over fears, all that kind of stuff. And as they go about this, they start to develop feelings for each other. You can tell that they really have a connection. And it's sad because you know that they're both going to die at the end, and you're seeing something that's potentially like a really nice relationship develop, except it can't really develop. I'm hoping that there's going to be some magical twist and these two get to end up together, but I have a feeling that it's going to break my heart. This was also on my Pride TBR for the month of June, so chip in one more off of the list. So that is the whole tag. I would love to hear in the comments what your least favorite trope is and what your favorite trope is. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed and you find my content interesting, please hit that subscribe button. I do try my best to post regular content. So that's all for now. Again, I'm Bandy. This is my channel, BandysBooks. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.